It is disappointing that this fragrance has been reformulated in the manner that it has, and such a premium brand is selling this to the public. Hello, and welcome back to Higher Sense with Haz, the channel that does reviews and pulls no punches, no matter what the brand. And today we're going to be reviewing none other than Green Irish Tweed by Creed. So I'm going to run through the notes listed for Green Irish Tweed, and just as a matter of point, this is for Green Irish Tweed 2024 formulation and not the previous 1985 release version. So therefore I'm going to give you the ingredients for the current version. I'll also give the ingredients for the previous version before we go into the full review, the reasons for which will become apparent in due course. So the notes for the current formulation will be on your screen now. So the top notes for the current formulation of Creed Green Irish Tweed is as follows. In the top, and by that I mean the notes that you'll initially smell when you spray the fragrance on your skin or clothing, the top notes are peppermint, lemon verbena, bergamot, and galbanum. And in the mid, so the notes you get after an hour or so of wearing, are as follows: geranium, lavender, and violet. And in the base, these are the notes that you get to after a number of hours, which form the main composition of the fragrance, the backbone, so to speak. And they are sandalwood, cedarwood, ambroxan, which is an important point, and oak moss. The original formulation for Green Irish Tweed that was released in 1985, and the notes that are listed on Fragrantica, are as follows: lemon verbena in the top, with iris and violet leaf in the mid, and in the base there's ambergris and sandalwood. Now the ambergris formed the main backbone of the original formulation, and this helped with its longevity and also helped to keep the other notes together. This is now missing in the current formulation, has been replaced by ambroxan, which, albeit is a somewhat suitable replacement, it doesn't do the fragrance justice so far as longevity goes. Looking at the bottle for Green Irish Tweed, it's a very elegant bottle. The cap from my formulation, which is a newer formulation, I believe it's a 2022 formulation, which is the same as the current formulation. The cap is plastic, it's not metal. It's click on, it's non-magnetic. Very nice, elegant cap, suits the bottle very well. And the bottle, as you can see, is a matte black. It's a very elegant bottle, a great looking bottle, one of the best bottles that I have in my collection. Now, let's look at the atomizer. As you can see, the atomizer is very good. The atomizer is pretty much like a fire hydrant, really, compared to some atomizers. And it produces a very good cloud of fragrance when pressed. I'll go on to discuss the reasons why I think this may be. Creed, as you know, are a premium brand. And you can look at it one of two ways. The atomizer is either a very good atomizer because of the strength of the brand and the price of the fragrance, which is great because at the end of the day, when you're putting fragrance on and applying it to yourself, you want to apply it at a good rate. That could be a positive. It could also be the fact that Creed want you to use more fragrance compared to a standard atomizer so that you get through the fragrance at a faster rate. Why would that be? The faster you use the fragrance, the faster you may need a replacement. And that is obviously going to make them more money. So it depends if you're cynical or not, which way you look at it. I very much enjoy the atomizer. I think it's a great atomizer. And for the brand and the bottle, I think it suits it perfectly. Discussing the current formulation for Green Irish Tweed, I've just sprayed the atomizer and I'm also wearing the fragrance. And I sprayed it on this suit and shirt less than 5 hours ago. The reason for me saying that will become apparent as the review goes on. Now, in the current formulation, off the top, the notes certainly are very bright, they're very green, they're very grassy, they're very fragrant, slightly citric. I do think the top notes in the current formulation are excellent. It's, again, vibrant, it's zingy, it produces a very fresh and clean scent and aroma, which is very, very good. The top notes of the fragrance do last for a solid hour or so, certainly projecting quite well for that first hour. I would say it projects a foot and a half on maybe 5 or 6 sprays. For this fragrance, I would recommend at least 5 or 6 sprays. The reason being the projection is decent, but not great. But it's the longevity on this fragrance that is an issue. So you will have to be more than average sprayer to be able to get the best from this fragrance. Now, going on to discuss the notes in the mid, these are the notes that come through after the top notes have died down slightly and the mid notes come through. The top notes don't disappear, but the mid notes come through, or the heart notes, whatever you want to call them, they come through and supplement the fragrance. Now, in the mid, it's listed as geranium, lavender, and violet. Certainly, I do get these notes coming through. The lavender is especially fresh and clean, gives a nice little floral touch there. The violet, I'm not sure if they've got it as violet or violet leaf. There is a slight difference, but either way, again, that gives a slightly floral note, somewhat earthy. And the geranium, again, just adds to the freshness and the slight woodiness of the fragrance. The mid notes, I would say, come through after an hour and a half. Going on to the base notes, the notes that hold the fragrance together, these come through after 2.5 hours, not long after the mid, to be honest. Now, in the base, it's listed as sandalwood, cedarwood, ambroxan, and oak moss. Now, what I will say about this is that the oak moss is a welcome addition. It adds to the green and woody feel of the fragrance. Again, the cedarwood and the sandalwood adds the woody note and the backbone of the fragrance, really, and it holds it together. The sandalwood adds a creamy and smooth feel, and the cedarwood just adds a bit of punch and a bit of backbone. Now, the ambroxan, that gives the earthy, woody tone, and also helps to bind it together, albeit, as previously discussed, it's nowhere near as good as the natural ambergris that was in the fragrance before, but it's a somewhat useful substitute, I would say, here. The top notes, as discussed previously, the peppermint, the lemon verbena, the bergamot, and the galbanum all add to a very fresh, bright, zingy, somewhat citric, but very grassy and slightly mossy, very green fragrance. And for me, it's an excellent opening. It's quite unique. It is a classic. It has stood the test of time. And certainly no one's going to be offended by this fragrance. And I do think that the additional top notes do help this fragrance. And they both bring it up to date, make it more modern, and they complement each other very, very well. It's blended excellently. It's very smooth. There's no jarring edges here. So the top notes, the initial blast that you get from the fragrance, it's very, very impressive. Again, one of the reasons for this could be when someone's shopping for a fragrance, and at the end of the day, Creed want to sell their fragrances. If you're shopping in a high-end mall or department store, and you try the fragrance and the assistant gets the fragrance, shows you the gorgeous bottle and gets the atomizer, gives you a good blast, and then you smell the fragrance. Now, to sell a fragrance well, it's going to be the initial blast that you get from the fragrance, because nobody who's potentially buying a fragrance on the spur of the moment is going to say, oh yes, that smells marvellous. Just let me do some shopping for 3 or 4 hours so I can get to the mid notes and the base notes and see what the fragrance is all about. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. Most purchases are spur of the moment because humans are very impulsive figures. And yes, so this is why I think they've added to the top notes, because if someone in the store sprays the fragrance, you smell the fragrance and you get the initial feeling for the fragrance and what it does to your brain. If you're mightily impressed by it, you may well be impulsive and say, yeah, that's an excellent scent. If that's what I want, that's for me, I'm going to make the purchase here and now. And then when you've gone home with the fragrance and you're very happy, you may well apply it the next day. You get the initial burst, you're very happy with it. But then, as a few hours go on, the fragrance, you may find maybe a bit of a letdown. I'm not saying that this is in this case, but what I'm saying is I think the reason for the additional top notes is to impress upon a potential purchaser that you should buy this fragrance because the top notes are excellent. And I agree that they are. As you go through this fragrance and you go into the maiden, the geranium, the lavender and the violet comes through, again, these are the floral notes. These supplement the fragrance very well, adds a slight floral touch, but again, this fragrance, it's very green, it's very fresh, and it's very clean and vibrant. These are supporting notes. They don't necessarily stand out of themselves, but they do supplement the fragrance. What I will say is that the notes in the mid, they do stay throughout the fragrance, but they're not highly detectable. So if you're looking to buy a fragrance purely on the notes listed in the mid, this may not be the fragrance for you. Going into the base notes, the sandalwood, cedarwood, ambroxan and oak moss. When you look at the top notes, these notes are very well chosen, complement the fragrance very well. And I would say that these notes are needed in the fragrance. Now, the issue that I have with this fragrance, it's not necessarily citric freshy, so to speak. And freshies, your summer freshies, your heavy citruses are known for not lasting very well. And once the top notes are gone, you're not left with much of a fragrance and it disappears fairly quickly. Now, this, to me, is an issue with this fragrance. The lack of ambergris to hold the fragrance together and hold all of the notes and support the notes. It's not here any longer. Now, the notes that you've got in the base, albeit they are good notes, I don't feel that there's enough in there. And I think that's one of the problems with the fragrance. I do think that it has longevity issues. Now, again, there's another little theory for this, which I'll go on to discuss now. In brief, and this is relevant to this fragrance, and what I will say is all opinions are my own that have been based on research that I've done over the years from forums and BSc and things like that, so don't hold me to this. But originally, the House of Creed were owned by family members, and it's a very high-end brand with a great reputation, albeit premium prices. Now, fairly recently, in the last few years, Creed has been purchased, and ever since the purchase, there's been a number of issues and murmurings amongst the community that maybe the fragrance isn't quite as good as it used to be. Now, people have suggested that maybe have weakened the scent. They're not using as many of or as much of the essential oils that are in these fragrances, and therefore they want to make money. They're a big powerhouse business, whereas Creed used to take pride in their fragrances, and that's why the ingredients used were always top class. Now, so far as Green Irish Tweed's gone over the years, it hasn't really been affected by many issues so far as reformulation goes. Reformulation is where the contents or the levels used are adjusted. Now, what I will say is that certainly in the more recent iterations, the top notes have been added to and slightly adjusted, as of the base notes, because of the regulations regarding ambergris. That was a enforced move, so to speak. And what I will suggest is that the current owners have maybe tampered with the formulation a bit too much. And the prices for Creed have gone up quite significantly over the last 3 or 4 years. They say it's down to the price of ingredients. I suggest it might be using the premium name to their advantage to make money. But it's also disappointing if indeed they have weakened the formulation. And again, that's just a rumour, and I can only comment on what I've experienced. What I will say is I've owned Creed for a number of years. And my last iteration of Green Irish Tweed was around 2012, 2013. I don't have that bottle to review for you, so I have to go off scent memory. But what I will say is the original formulation, very simple, very effective, and it did used to last. What I will say on this current formulation is the performance isn't quite there. The longevity, it isn't quite there. Albeit the projection is decent, it's not fantastic. The longevity of this fragrance is currently, in its current iteration, around 4 to 5 hours. Now, that's disappointing for a number of reasons, which I'll discuss. The first reason for that being disappointing is the price. The price for this fragrance is currently £265 for 100 millilitres, which this bottle is. So that works out at £2.65 per millilitre. Usually in a fragrance, approximately 10 sprays is 1 millilitre. So if that was the case here, which I suggest this may be only 8 or 9 sprays because of the excellent atomizer, 10 sprays of this fragrance may cost you around £2.65 at the 100 millilitre price point. If you were to buy a 50 millilitre bottle, that's £190 retail, and that works out at nearly £4 per millilitre. Now, for me, that is just too expensive for what this fragrance currently offers. If it was the previous formulation, I may be happy spending that money, but not in the current formulation. Now, where would you wear this fragrance? Well, as you may or may not have noticed, I'm in a suit, and I think that this fragrance is best suited to that kind of environment. I would say that this fragrance is best in an office environment, as it's non-offensive, it's very clean, it's very fresh, it's not overly powerful. So I would say in the office environment, it's excellent as an everyday wear, although you will have to look at the price point for whether you can afford to wear this every day. Again, that impacts on my recommendation of the fragrance. I would say you could also wear this outdoors when you're wearing maybe a white linen shirt and shorts. And the seasons that I would recommend that you wear this would be spring and summer. You could potentially wear it in autumn, but I definitely wouldn't wear it in winter. I don't think it's appropriate for the scent profile nor the strength of the fragrance. I would say spring's probably the best time to wear this, as the fragrance itself is reminiscent of a spring day in the fields, in the meadows. And I think it's an excellent fragrance for that type of season. Briefly discussing the previous formulation, before the ambergris was removed and the notes were tampered with in around 2014, the price was a bit lower. I would say it was from memory in 2014. For the 100 mil, I think it was maybe £50–55 cheaper than it currently is. So it's quite a significant difference. Back on the old formulation, the projection was better. I would say the projection was a couple of feet for a good couple of hours. And then I would say that it was at least a foot for the next 2 hours. You certainly couldn't feel to be noticed with this fragrance. Whereas the current formulation, you will get noticed, but it's not a powerhouse by any stretch of the imagination. So if you want a somewhat subtle, inoffensive scent, current formulation's fine. The longevity on the previous formulation was easily 7 to 8 hours, and it would last all day. Now, going back to what I would recommend, which is in an office environment, most people work at 9 till 5, that's 8 hours. So if I want the fragrance to wear for work, I want it to last for 8 hours. If it doesn't last for 8 hours, then it's not necessarily fit for purpose. Now, the current formulation, I would say, even on 6, 7, or 8 sprays, will get 4 or 5 hours of longevity before you really have to put your nose to your wrist or your shirt to detect it, which is a shame. And the previous formulation would easily get 7 or 8 hours. The longevity on the current formulation is 4 to 5 hours, and it struggles to get there even on 6 to 8 sprays, which is disappointing because it's not going to last the working 8-hour day, which I think is the purpose of this everyday fragrance. The previous formulation would last for 7 to 8 hours, not a problem, and this would be on 3 to 4 sprays, so you're using less of the fragrance and it would last for a lot longer. So that is a shame in its current format. In conclusion, I would say it's a very clean, fresh, green, classy fragrance, which is brilliant for everyday wear. But at the current price point, it could be difficult for people to justify that. And for me, it's the longevity that's the issue. And for a premium brand, I would expect better. So that is a disappointment. To barely get 4 to 5 hours from this fragrance on skin and a little more on clothing for the amount that you have to use, it's going to hurt your wallet. So on that basis, I don't think I can recommend this fragrance. The scent profile is excellent. It's just gone too quick. Now, what I will say is everyone's different and results on skin can vary. I don't think I've got particularly dry skin. I would say my skin is average. And when I've looked at other reviews for other fragrances, I would say that I get the suitable longevity that is recommended. It is disappointing that this fragrance has been reformulated in the manner that it has. And such a premium brand is selling this to the public. And as you can probably tell by my demeanour, this is how I currently view Green Irish Tweed. It's not as sophisticated as it once was. It's not as clean and tidy as it once was. And overall, I think it's somewhat of a letdown. If money is no object, the scent profile is excellent, but you'll have to leave your bottle at work because you'll have to reapply it after lunch, after a few hours, which for a premium brand, unfortunately, it's just not good enough.